Last summer, we were in Europe for 6 amazing weeks. And I'm here to tell you there were no Zoom calls, no emergency escalations, and I was not spending time by myself trying to manage something while my family explored Europe without me. A few years ago, this would have been a dream because at that point, I was chasing titles, chasing promotions, and chasing equity packages. I wish somebody would have taken the time to tell me that equity without a plan or a purpose is really just a gilded cage. Today, I'm gonna walk you through how I transitioned from scattered money maker, chasing the titles, getting burned out, to strategic money manager, scaling and growing my micro-family office while I own my time. I wanna show you how you can transition from being that money maker to that intentional money manager, reclaiming all your time before you burn it all. Welcome back to Managing Tech Millions. I'm your host, Christopher Nelson. I'm excited for you to be joining me this week for episode 110 of Managing Tech Millions. That's also episode 8 in our Foundation series. Our Foundation series is a specific series where I'm diving deep into what you need to know to be able to build and run your own micro-family office. In today's episode, I'm going to be digging into my origin story, where, like many of you, at one point in my career, I was convinced that what I needed was more income, and more income was going to get me to freedom. What I didn't realize is that it was really building a business around my portfolio and my wealth that truly unlocked the lifestyle that I always wanted. In today's episode, I'm going to walk through my career, the mindset shifts, the experiences that I had that will tell you exactly how I learned to uncover this path. And my hope for you is that you can get lessons and understandings of what's going on in your life and being able to ask questions so that you can unlock this for yourself. So last week in episode 109, I went through the first part of my origin story, which was really this awakening around the sudden wealth syndrome I had in my first IPO, where I realized two important things. Number one is that the people that were part of my network that didn't actually build wealth with me didn't really understand and know what I was going through. It's really important for you to understand. If you didn't get a chance, go back to episode 109, listen to that. The other thing is that there's other of our peers that have been through the IPOs, been through the acquisitions, or built RSUs over time that are sitting on a lot of wealth, that they want to stay in this income mindset of more is better. Let me just build a big pile of wealth and I'll just drain it. Those people don't want to be on this other part of the journey, which is the journey from money maker to money manager. And I want to walk you through my story today. So let me pick up where I left off last week, which was I realized that there was this whole second mountain to climb. Once I climbed the initial mountain to build wealth, I realized to get to freedom, to get to where I controlled my time, I controlled my purpose, and I could live life how I wanted to design it, I needed to climb the second mountain from money maker to money manager. So I was here at the bottom of the mountain. I had sort of gotten through some of the mindset issues that I covered off last week. And I realized that to move forward, I had to start getting educated. I had to start learning about how do you manage wealth. So I started by reading books. I got books that were recommended to me. The other thing that I did was I sought out fee-only financial advisors. I thought it was important as I was getting educated that I try to understand two things. Number one, what would be the financial planning that a high dollar wealth manager would recommend to somebody like myself from a pure planning perspective? And then also, what would be the investments they would offer me that I could either choose to opt into or not? Because again, this was fee only. So there were no assets under management. I wasn't giving them any control. I was going to learn. And I think for many of you that are in this situation where you've built this wealth and you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious, seek education. Seek foundational fundamentals on what it means to manage wealth. So let me let me share with you what I discovered. So meeting with this high-end wealth manager, I mean, I think we paid for this financial planning package somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000. What I learned is that the planning that they offered us was truly just a checklist. Like, here's the things that you need to do, right? You need to get an estate plan. You need to make sure that you have a will, that there's clarity on what's going to happen to your assets after you die. You need to make sure that you have good risk management. You need to get umbrella insurance. You need to get life insurance coverage that's going to pay all your debts if you happen to pass away. Different things that are going to set the family up for success now that you have wealth. And then there was the checklist of, are you filling up your 401ks and doing all these fundamental basic financial planning things. It's really a checklist. And then what I discovered is their offering around wealth management was truly boilerplate. Like, we're going to put you in these set of funds, things that I know that many DIY investors do on themselves for much lower cost. And when I talked about the engagement, their goal was to, meet with you just a handful of times a year to make sure that everything was on course. So what I took away from that is they want to get me into a scenario where I just click all of their boxes and I'm just being managed. I realized that wealth management at this level, what they push down to us, that I believe is akin to personal finance, and I talk a little bit about this in my microfamily office, is they just want to make sure that you are doing the right things, you're checking the check boxes, but there's no active management. If the market goes down, they're not making moves with your portfolio in some of these standard ones. So that was a big takeaway from me, that this wasn't about management in the sense of active management. It was really just around, making sure that check boxes were checked and things were being done. So what I learned, the big takeaway from my education working with this traditional wealth manager to get this in place, was a couple things. The one valuable piece of information that I got from him is that I up-leveled and started working with a tax strategist that they recommended. That was absolutely tremendous, because what I realized is that a tax strategist for somebody with equity compensation is a game changer. They allowed me to save hundreds of thousands of dollars. This was a different relationship. So this wasn't through the financial advisor. This was a recommendation to somebody else. The second thing was, I want to be the CEO of my portfolio. I knew in that moment, and this was, happened probably about 6 months after the IPO, I knew for myself, I wanted to be the CEO in my portfolio, and I wanted to manage it. What I didn't realize at that point is I wasn't clear on what that meant, or what was the consequences of me putting myself in that seat. I think for many of you, you may be able to relate. You may be saying the same thing that I did, where you see this industry and realize that we could do better ourselves, and we want to own it. We want to own the result, meaning that we want to own the inputs and manage the outputs. That's the best that we can do in investing. But when we walk away, what does that really mean? What does it mean to be the CEO of your portfolio? And I realized this was the next lesson that I had to learn. So let's fast forward now to 2016. In 2016, at that point, as the CEO of my portfolio, I got to tell you, I hadn't really done much. I was a hobbyist. I was, when I had time, I would work on it. And then I would also, my investments didn't have really any direction. I would invest in, some commercial real estate over here, or maybe some venture capital funds over here. I was really all over the map. But at that point in time, getting some advice from some mentors, I made the decision with my wife to take a new role and to look for a new opportunity. And this was the opportunity to climb the ladder. I was excited to, as I was told that you're ready now for the next role as the chief information officer, I went on a large search, found a role, and we relocated to New York City. And what I quickly found is that I was caught between this beautiful gilded cage of dinners out, of nights at the basketball game, of team building events in the city, and my family that was living 30 minutes away in New Jersey, who, the babies were still young at the time. My wife needed a lot of help. She needed some rest. I was caught in the middle of both of these. And the reality is that I thought that more income was going to get me more freedom, What I realized in hindsight is that as I took the role, as I climbed the ladder, I got the title, is that created actually more of the gilded cage, where I was trapped in this environment that was giving me a lot, that was really fun, that was exciting, but it was keeping me away from my family that needed me tremendously at that point in time. What I realized is in reflection is that, when we do take promotions, when we do take titles, that will come at a cost. And generally the cost is time. I also learned the fact that if I am not, building my wealth with intention, it's not going to work for me when I need it. This is the difference between the vision and the reality. I had this clear vision from when I was in college in the 1990s when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, that in his fourth quadrant, you build the equity and the money's working for you so that then you can live the lifestyle that you want. Now, I had done what my peers and my mentors had told me to get this promotion. I was living this fabulous lifestyle, meaning that I was living in New Jersey, had a beautiful home. I was working in New York City, incredibly exciting, great amenities, great benefits, but I wasn't happy. And my portfolio wasn't there to support me. My biggest takeaway was really the fact that my business, my portfolio needed to have a purpose. It needed to have a mission statement, something that it was driving for, and some structure. Because if it didn't, then it was not going to be working in the direction that I needed it to. The other thing was that I needed my portfolio to be, in this micro family office, to be at the same level as what I was working in my day job. Because if it didn't have the same level and the same priority, and I wasn't treating it like one, when I got to the point where I needed it, it wasn't going to work for me. Those were some of my two biggest takeaways. And I know that you can relate, because many people that I speak with too, whether I'm coaching them, whether they've attended the Wealth Ops Way, many of you are stuck because your wealth is building and growing, but it doesn't have a mission or a purpose. So let me take a pause right here. If you want to give your wealth a mission and purpose, every month I run the Wealth Ops Way. If you go to wealthops.live, you can apply for this live event right now, where I walk you through in 2 days, how do you actually architect, create a legacy statement and an investment thesis for your portfolio. You should definitely check that out. All right, let's get back to the story. It was really at this point in time that I was ready, my wife was ready, so that we could start truly climbing this mountain from moneymaker to money manager. So after New York, we unwound that relatively quickly because it just was not a great fit for the family. One of the hardest things that I did professionally, but personally, it really unlocked me and got me focused. I made the decision from a career perspective. I no longer wanted to climb the ladder. I wanted to be very intentional, and I wanted to focus on, VP roles, number 2 to the CIO, and not climb anymore. The other thing was a strategic move to Texas. We wanted to lower our overall cost base. We wanted to get out of high tax states. We wanted to live somewhere where there was no income tax, and that we could also participate inside of the real estate market. That took us to Austin, Texas in 2017. It was a true geographic reset because our expenses were much lower, taxes were much lower, but there were lots of different job opportunities. So I took a vice president role there at a security startup here in Texas. And what we really got focused on is that while I was working in this particular role, we were going to be laser focused on how do we now start building and managing our wealth ourselves. We wanted to truly take control. So one of the first big moves that we did is we made the decision to sell our house in California. It was worth around $2 million at the time. We sold that home to buy a primary residence here that was less than $500,000, and then to take the other proceeds and we bought 5 single-family homes. Those single-family homes were all cash flowing, and they all paid the mortgage for the primary residence that we live in today, where this office is. Haha. So what that opened for us is that was the first bold stroke, the biggest move that we'd made to date to redeploy from one asset into other assets that could then start unlocking true freedom. Because at that point, we no longer had a mortgage payment. We had a business. We had a business that we needed to operate, but it removed a large expense constraint for us. That also allowed us to have more income that we could then invest because we didn't need to make that particular payment. This was truly the on-ramp to clarity and became a real growth moment for us where we could actually make more moves when it came to investing. We felt confident and we also had clarity. I think when you add those two things together, they equal unparalleled momentum. At that point, we also started diversifying into commercial real estate. We were looking for different types of income investments that could bring income into our portfolio because, again, the purpose of our portfolio was to create work optionality for myself and then also for my wife. And so it was really important for us that we started building that base of income, all while we were still managing some growth in our portfolio as well. So the key takeaway was that your capital isn't freedom unless it's working for you. And also that the more you get educated, the more you get experience, the faster that you can move towards your desired outcome. The insight was also that once I left the hobbyist role and I really gave it that first priority, that mission, that purpose, I was going to start moving and climbing in the direction that I wanted to. But I also think that, as I got in and we worked on the business, we were able to make so much progress in a short period of time because we were focused and we had a mission. But what I realized coming out of that is that what happened next is that the business still wasn't as mature as we wanted it to be. Now we were at the point where we were really making momentum. We had a small portfolio of single family homes. We had started to make some commercial real estate investments as well. But one of the most important things that happened, I think, between myself and my wife, Regine, was the fact that we really started to work together as a team and treat this truly as a business. What this meant was she took on the role and responsibility of managing all of the single family homes in the active portfolio. I took responsibility over the passive portfolio or a lot of the commercial real estate and other investments that we were making at that point in time. We both had different goals that we were achieving, things that we both agreed on, and we were meeting regularly to ensuring that we were on track. We'd actually created a structure and moved it outside of our personal finances and really started to own it and run it as a business. Here's what happened is that all of our skills that we both had from being professionals inside of technology, we started getting leverage from those. Those skills allowed us to move forward faster. I realized that my experience from reading software contracts as a software buyer inside of tech companies also made me very astute at reading private placement memorandums or PPMs, and I could understand what were really the key portions of the contract. My wife, who can get educated very quickly, right? She has multiple master's degrees, right? She went and got her broker's license. She got a real estate license, then became a broker and was really able to manage our real estate incredibly effectively. And we added for a short period of time, so we were also running some short-term rentals as well. So the great news is that we started building this as a family system. It wasn't just a solo act. And that we realized that the more we built this as a micro family office, that was something to benefit my wife and I, this generation that's building it, and that is also we're including our sons as we grow and scale it. That was effectively turning our portfolio from just this equity that was growing into an actual asset that was working for us. So the big takeaway in learning is you don't need $1 billion to act like a family office or get the same benefit. The reality is you can do it with a much smaller amount as long as you apply those same systems, processes, and principles. And what I want to tell you is this isn't as hard as it sounds. many people feel and think, well, this is overwhelming, right? All of this stuff, you built all this business. This is exactly why I built Wealth Ops, so that you can have a micro family office in a box, so that you can understand, what do you need to do to architect? We've got templates, structure, lessons, learning, so you can go through that. How do I actually build it? Well, we've got a business builder checklist. We've got a business launch plan so you can launch it. And then this is what Wealth Ops Collective is for, so that we can manage and run our portfolios together, and you can get experience and get confidence to understand that this is something that your skills can map to very easily, and you can do effectively, as the lead, or with your family completely engaged. It was a very exciting time as we grew and we scaled this. The next thing that we had to do is we had to see if it really worked. For many of you, it seems overwhelming when I say create a purpose for your portfolio. Well, you can easily solve that problem by coming to the Wealth Ops Way. The Wealth Ops Way is my 2-day masterclass that I do live every single month for you, that walks you through how do you build a legacy statement and how do you build an investment thesis. These are going to be the core documents that drive your portfolio and your microfamily office year over year, month over month. It's not as hard as you think. If you want to lean in and do that with me, with real examples, with walkthrough exercise, with people just like you who are asking similar questions, go to wealthops.live right now, see when our next course is, and apply. I'll see you there. When you build something, whether that's a piece of technology or whether that's a business, you need to test it. You need to see if it works and if it functions. And for a micro family office, that test was in 2019. In 2019, that's when I took a sabbatical after, working straight from 2001 to 2019. I was wiped. I needed a bit of a sabbatical. I needed some time off. And at that point, we had built out the micro family office. We had income investments. We obviously had the investment for the home, things that were working, things were functioning, but we had to test to see if the system worked. And I think we shouldn't be afraid of that. I think it was very intentional for me that when I left that time, I said, I'm taking a sabbatical. I didn't burn the ships. I didn't say, I'm leaving this W-2 forever. I've got a micro family office. I'm done. No, I wasn't 100% sure. I wanted to test it. And I think in technology, taking a sabbatical, very, very normal. So I took a sabbatical and was able to spend some time working on the business. I was able to spend some time doing some more investing, growing and scaling it. And as I got into this around 9 months, we also got into 2020, is I realized a couple of things. Number one is I had built this microfamily office so that I was able to replace just my paycheck, meaning that I didn't have any margin in there. And what I'd learned, some advanced lessons that I learned when I was testing, is that, you always want to produce 1.5 or 2x of your paycheck, so that if some investments don't perform, you have some flexibility in there. I didn't know that. I didn't discover that until I got into test mode. Test mode also took place in 2020, and some investments performed better than others. So all of a sudden I looked at my diversification and realized, you know what? I could be a little overweight in multifamily. I need some better diversification there in different types of investments. So number one is, when I got into the sabbatical, the microfamily office was not ready for me to be financially independent. It wasn't. And I was okay with that, because this was a strategic move to stress test it, to understand, if it was working, if it didn't. I also became clear that we did have a real business. Like, this thing can work. I also realized there were different things that I could optimize. I could go deeper into my tax planning, make this even more tax efficient so that I could reclaim some income and I didn't actually have to make as much. I could make it more tax efficient. All of these lessons would not have been learned if I didn't take the sabbatical. But what I had coming out of the sabbatical that was incredibly powerful: clarity. I knew now that I needed another $1.5 million of equity, that if I was able to infuse that into my portfolio, I could then all of a sudden get it working to the level that I wanted it to work. That was very powerful because at that point, when I got to the end of that, I made the intention to then go back to work. But I went back to work with clarity of what I needed to accomplish. And what I want to tell you is that when you're building something with purpose, like your micro family office, and you have to go to your day job to do work, but you know that you're harvesting great equity and building it, that makes your work purposeful. The biggest takeaway is that if you never take a step back and you stress test it, you're never going to understand if it's working exactly how you want. And that's so important. And the reality is that when you do go back to that work with purpose, you're going to find that you're going to have more energy than you ever thought you did. So in 2020, I started doing another job search and found an opportunity that was incredibly valuable for me to trade my time and talent in. And that was going to work for the company GitLab. They were around 18 months before an IPO. And this was the sweet spot of where I'd spent my career. Again, I was the number 2 to the CIO. I took a senior director role. I had no desire to go out and do a CIO search. And the reason is because I had purpose and I had a mission. I knew that I could take off the equity that I needed or pretty close to it. And I didn't need all of the stress and the drama that came with the CIO role. I also knew that I could be a great advocate and support my good friend Brian Weiss, who was the CIO. So because I had this purpose, it was one of these roles that I was so excited to take. I was happy to be there, and I was energized every day because I knew what I was building. I had clarity and purpose. And I think the key thing is that this helps reframe employment. When employment becomes a tool that is part of unlocking your freedom, you get excited about it. When employment and chasing income becomes this gilded cage, you want to run from it. That's so important to understand. And I think many people can relate is that this equity now became fuel that was going to help unlock and be the final key to get me out of this cage forever. The key thing was we had the number, we had the focus. And so as I was working there, and we got through the IPO in October of 2021, all of a sudden, boom, the shares are liquid. Then all of a sudden it became with clarity of how much can we harvest? How much can we take off? How much do we want to leave with? And ultimately, that August of 2022 was when I was able to say enough. I had enough. I had some other interesting projects that I was working on. I had enough, equity that I could go and fuel the micro family office. So it was time. And this is the key thing is that when you're building a business and you have a clear strategy, you also then have worked it and you understand and know what it takes to make it work, then your career again becomes a tool and it's not a forever sentence. It's not something that you have to do forever. April 26, 2022 is a day that I'll always remember because that was the day that I truly did walk out the door and say, I'm done. I was able to start posting and talking about it on LinkedIn that I have transitioned now from moneymaker to money manager, and I'm just going to run and manage my micro family office. It was out of that I was able to build purpose, but ultimately on that day, it was graduation from ultimately the person who had entered in 2001 into the job market to build a career in tech and then understand halfway into it that I needed equity to set myself free. Then realizing in 2012, I want to be the CEO of my portfolio. Okay, what does that mean? It took me from 2012 to 2016 to realize, well, I had to have a purpose. Then I needed to treat it and run it like a business and be in that business to eventually walking out in freedom. And I got to say, it was definitely one of the best days of my life. I get questions all the time. I have friends that I used to work with that will reach out on LinkedIn, get time on my calendar, and we meet. And they just want to know, like, what are you doing? Many people don't understand. sometimes it was it was similar to how I explained careers in tech and consulting to people who aren't in that business. But my life is very different. They see pictures of me. Oh, I go spend, on average 6 weeks every summer in Europe. We take trips. We take now service trips a couple times a year to Uganda, to the Dominican Republic. We go and fly back to the Bay Area to spend time with people that we care and love. And the rest of my time is spent managing my family office and working on interesting projects. Like this, like helping people really understand how do they transition from moneymaker to money manager. But I'm here to tell you, like this is life running a micro family office. Like I have routines in my life. I have, time that I spend on my micro family office every day, making sure that things are moving forward. And I also have projects and things that I love and care about that I spend time on too. But it's also very much integrated in and around my family, where we're making sure that, we're all having dinner together every night as a family. There's no phones. We're fully present. We have weekends that I can go and be at sporting events or volunteer and participate and be very, very present. I do not feel trapped in a cage anymore. I feel blessed and I feel excited to be where I am. And this is exactly what a micro family office is. And ever since I left, my full-time occupation in 2022, one of the things that I became focused on is how do I share this with other people? How do I help my brothers and sisters in tech that work so hard understand how they can unlock their wealth and get it to work for them? And this is why I have made the decision to focus on helping you build and run your micro family office. That's why Managing Tech Millions is an education platform where I want to give you real education. I know that I dabbled for a while in private equity and raising money and raising investments, but that's no longer what I'm doing now. I am focused on giving education that is grounded in the core fundamentals of private equity, investing, learning from single family offices and creating this micro family office structured in a very easy way for you to architect, build, and run it yourself, with the goal of being able to unlock the lifestyle that I know many people want, but they don't know how to get there. And this was all built out of my journey, because my journey was one where I had to make mistakes that took me years. And the opportunity that you have is to learn from my mistakes, and you can condense that timeline. I'm quite convinced that people that are laser focused could put together very condensed 3 to 5 year plans and have a very clean, robust exit. And some could do it even shorter, depending on how much capital they have behind them. But ultimately, the key thing to understand is that all of the lessons that I learned is that there is this other journey. Once you make the wealth, if you really want to unlock the lifestyle, you have got to climb the next mountain, which is the transition from money maker to money manager. What I've also learned along the way is that money management is not difficult. It's not money rocket science. It's really manage it. You're managing it, and you need to get grounded in the fundamentals so you know how do you take risk out of your decisions. That's really what investing really is. You also need to be the CEO. You need to take ownership of it. You need to give it the priority that you give your career. You need to also get clear on, the more you go after that career and you climb that ladder, the more time it's going to be taking away from your family and some of these other things. And just make the right choices around that for you. And then you have to treat it like a business. It has to have structure, and it's going to be even more tax optimized if you actually put it into an actual business structure. And the more you're in it, the more you run it, then you're going to understand what it takes to test it, what it takes to build it so that it is a robust business that can provide for this generation and be around for future generations. What this unlocks for you is then the ability to make a lot of choices yourself. Some people may want to work, some people may not want to work, but those are choices that you can make when you ultimately have a business that provides the checks that you used to get from corporate. The key thing that I want you to take away with is that a micro family office just isn't for the ultra wealthy. It can be for people who've got $2, $3, $4 million but you just want to put in the work and you want to structure it in the right way. You want to build it and you want to scale it. The goal is to stop reacting to things that are coming at you and to start building towards your future. The journey that I was on was not about leaving work behind, but it was about changing roles. I knew that I did no longer wanted to be an executive in tech. I wanted to be the CEO of my own company, my own microfamily office. And the reality is that I didn't stumble into freedom. It was a climb up a mountain that I had to traverse, and I had to get through some very difficult and challenging things, and I had to get there. But what I was ultimately building was a business and a lifestyle that I no longer needed a vacation from, but it was something that I curated and I designed. If you're in tech and you're struggling with some of these things, remember that freedom starts when you start up that second mountain. And if you want more information, you want to understand how this is done, managingtechmillions.com, that's your resource. We've got this weekly podcast. We also have a weekly newsletter. We're starting to release some longer form blogs. I mean, we have so many things coming in this direction, but we're here. If you ever have any questions, once you subscribe, you get a newsletter, hit reply. We answer all questions, or you can go onto YouTube, add comments to the videos. We're there. My name is Christopher Nelson. This is Managing Tech Millions, the podcast. We'll see you next week.